Ladies and metalfish, this is your hard-boiled king of draw style, Daddy Janjo, baby. So, previously on Yu-Gi-Oh! CG, we discussed the importance of the starter box. The impact of a marketed release with an upgrade in the card pool made the game way more explosive with the likes of Celtic Guardian, Aquamador, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Raigeki. But with the premiere set being Volume 1, that implies there will be a follow-up. And with only 9 days removed from the starter box's release on March 27, 1999, we finally get Volume 2. The idea of a volume set when compared to a booster set was to give the game a stronger push and make gameplay more exciting, akin more to a chapter as opposed to supplemental material. That said, was V2 able to do what it set out to accomplish? And remember, the Janjo Zone is a one-man band when it comes to producing the historical Yu-Gi-Oh! Content you crave, so consider becoming a Janjo patron for as little as $2 a month. Your help to support the channel goes a long way, and if you don't, Minoru Suzuki will come into your house at night and give you a gotch-style pile driver. The set contained 40 cards, with all aside from 6 making their way to the west. Of those, I feel that Wood Remains and I have the most in common with. In regards to attack-potent monsters, there's slim pickings. Very few hit that 1200 plus threshold with the likes of Tyhone and Terra the Terrible, or as I like to call him, Shrek. The best of the common strikers has to be Urabi, whose name translates to Wild Raptor. It stacks a whopping 1500 attack stat that beats over Celtic Guardian or any contemporary from the V1 era. In regards to truly strong monsters, we only received one, Curse of Dragon. With a 2k attack stat, it can certainly beat over Urabi, yet it remains much weaker than its ultra-rare brethren. Another point of contention is that it is helpless against Aquamador, who equals it with a 2k defense stat. So in a way, the premier 5-star monster creates a middle ground between the high and low level monster lines. Curse of Dragon's position is further established thanks to the addition of more 2k defenders, Mystical Elf and Spirit of the Heart. Unlike Aquamador, these two monsters lack in power, yet are more available with Heart being a common and thus had a wider spread. Technically speaking, Elf is better than Harp due to synergy with Yami and Book of Secret Arts. Nonetheless, being able to block a variety of monsters aside from 3 cemented the idea of the wall monster. Quite honestly, V2 adjusted Duelist ideology that monsters could be important for just defense alone, more than the utility the starter box introduced. That said, V2 had more than just strong monsters. While being one of the only sets to not include a single trap card, there were plenty of new magic and equip magic cards. The equips follow the typology philosophy, now including Fiend, Plant, Dinosaur, Insect, and Machine. Only 2 of these had any potential right out the gate, one of which was Raise Body Heat, which, when equipped, gave a dinosaur monster a 300 attack boost. This could be used with Mammoth Graveyard, but more importantly Urabi to add some additional offensive pressure even if it couldn't beat over a wall. It's reminiscent of Beast Fangs and Silver Fang or Legendary Sword and Kanan, even if Raise Body Heat isn't an immediate deck inclusion. The other potential equip card was Dark Energy that worked on Fiend monsters with 2 usable targets in Trial of Nightmare and the newly released Terra the Terrible. At the very least, a monster with 1300 attack was solid if you didn't pre-order the starter box 3 times to get that playset of Celtic Guardian. This is in conjunction with the Yami deck I mentioned in the last video as probably the best tribal deck, which was essentially just the best of the worst. Since with Dark Energy, you'd be pressed to play weaker monsters than the bougie build, where that is already roaring to play Urabi and thus could fit in Raise Body Heat more naturally. All the other equip magic confirmed the notion that tribal strategies needed more than a thematic card to make the deck work. Laser Cannon Armor's best target was Kumutoko, which could only make use of the equip's defensive purpose. That said, it would be more beneficial to play a wall. The same issue applies to Vile Germs, although Green Phantom King is a much better card that can defend against Urabi by itself. Lastly, there was Machine Conversion Factory, which at first glance may seem odd. What the hell is a machine monster? Yeah, V2 was the first set to introduce machine monsters into the game, even if it was just one in Hologra. So right away, the equip only had one single target, and it was an 1100 attack attacker, which wouldn't amount to much. It reminds me of the equip in the TCG's Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon set, and the limited options we had in the West, Steel Ogre Grotto number 1 and Metal Dragon. Normal magic-wise, both burn and heal cards got an upgrade even if no one played them. But if you wanted to deal with the green pieces of paper, then Dispel was for you. This card destroys all kinds of magic, including field magic cards. This is in contrast to Remove Trap's singular target system. But remember that the official rules are still in play, and as such, if you should activate Dispel to destroy a field magic or an equip magic, then you can't activate another magic card that same turn. So do you activate it or save it in favor of your own power card? One important rule to note is that the original text translates to, quote, destroy one magic card located on the field, unquote. The text is a bit ambiguous since unlike in Yugi Kaiba format, where you can use Dispel on a face down to see if it's a trap hole or a bluff to make a safer, more educated play, the starter box rulebook doesn't specify whether a face down card is considered a magic or trap card, or if it's an unknown. According to an FAQ card later down the booster series, it specifies the rules regarding cards like Dispel and Arm Ninja. We don't have any documentation before this, so while I can't confidently say one way or another, there was the possibility that you could not use Dispel on face-down cards by this point. Speaking of power cards, one of note is Swords of Revealing Light. As the game's first ultra-rare magic card, this is a great stall tool against offensive pressure, as well as revealing enemy face-down monsters. It must be stated that the initial printing has a confusing translation where it wasn't clear on if it was only the opponent's monsters that got flipped face up, as it roughly translates to, quote, all enemy monsters are unable to attack for 3 turns. When used, the backside of a monster is turned to its front side, unquote. It was evident that it meant opposing monsters, seeing as Swords would get an errata later in the spring. Another weird aspect early on is that Swords was treated as a residual effect, where it wouldn't stay on field, yet its effect would remain, meaning Dispel was useless against it. Nevertheless, this was seen as an all-purpose replacement to Dragon Capture Jar, since it could be used regardless of the situation and did not deter your own cards. This made it one of the most popular cards from V2 and an immediate staple. The final key card from V2 was the game's first revival card, the super rare Monster Reborn. Firstly, the art is way different from how you remember seeing it. Many cards from the OCG to the TCG did get changed, whether for religious or sexual reasons. We've seen this with cards like Kanan and Final Flame. In Reborn's case, its original artwork is that of an Ankh, an ancient Egyptian symbol that symbolizes aspects of life. I think it's a bit silly that Konami felt the need to change a rather common symbol. Perhaps it was due to Christians continuing to use the symbol that caused concern by the censorship team. Although counterpoint, it was used as a modern symbol of counterculture in the 1960s, so who's to say what the ultimate decision was based on? But hey, then we wouldn't get that weird ornate whatever it is. Monster Reborn has a simple effect where you can revive any monster from the graveyard. Essentially, this was a counter to Trap Hole. Of course, it had more utility than that, since you can revive a monster that was destroyed at any point. If you brought back a Blue Eyes, then the game could shift in your favor. Not even Trap Hole can stop you. To specify this further, since this is an in-depth look at the OCG and not 2 dudes progressing through Wikipedia articles, Trap Hole's translation only mentions a monster summoned. So does this mean Reborn falls under this condition? Short answer is no, as special summoning does not exist in the game yet, and Reborn translates as putting a monster from the grave under your control. Fun OCG wording, yay! Either the case, Reborn may be the oldest revival card, yet it's the best revival card. And that's the card pool for Volume 2. The new monsters didn't blow anything out of the water, yet the gap between strong and weak monsters increased, and new fusions continue to disappoint. V2 improved the game for lower tier monsters, more push towards tribal strategies, and higher rarity spells that became instant staples, even if only roughly 25% of V2 was meta relevant. One complaint is that it kept the status quo in regards to a metagame existing via stat superiority. Beat over weak monsters with strong monsters, and if you can't, use a board wipe. Sure, you could play other decks, but doing so was a losing gambit. Evidently, Konami was still heavy on the equip philosophy since they viewed it as a beatdown format needing equip magic to make a difference. To be fair, this was early in the game with young players and no local tournament results, so we don't exactly know the meta scene apart from guesswork and a couple people posting about their memories online. Of course, many of these decks are built with the card pool in mind and not as much the difficulty and hindsight of building and buying the most optimal deck. So these decks, if anything, are more conceptual. So hope you play well and ante the right cards to build your best deck. With keeping the balance, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! May have felt like the manga, yet the game was essentially stagnant. Something had to give, because otherwise Konami would just print stronger monsters on loop and the cycle would create a Mobius strip. The company would have to look at things from a different perspective if they want Yu-Gi-Oh! To grow and survive. Konami would need to view it from an expert's perspective. And only one word would be able to describe what was about to happen. A revolution.